Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Guru Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Guru Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Kande lai je guen je do gane ra gai sho zan bon de sho ze she je ya bo guen je lo zan da se na je bo
Chanjo Pado Dane Japsu Che Take Shushe Jebe Lola Penja Sanje Roba Sho Sanje Cheda La Chanjo Pado Dane Japsu Che Take Shushe Jebe Lola Penja Sanje Roba Sho Kange to the nearest on a tower and the Bombay Tombation, on the Cotantella, Sadelo Cotam de la Sadelo Candela Sadelo Cotam de la Sadelo Cotam de la Sadelo. 오야 다 망했으면 탐지게 돈도 NP에 톱잘라나 매바 양타바 속에 산예지 건방을 보지 진내장 톱을 차 뒤시도 NP게지 자외 송랍 탐지지 내뒤바 상주를 안 된지 못 세년 몇 건을 끊지는 반응 세탑 디셈버 휴스
May I remind all of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate the bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this teaching on Lamrim, stages of the path to enlightenment, that essentializes the vital points of the path of practice leading to enlightenment.
와야 다 뛰는 현자 담배 취지 탐니 애닝을 다 갑자기 봐봤대 마 고아지 동에 삼바 소소 동에 삼바 제 고아지 동에 삼바 달라야 애니 비게지 동에 제 삼바 동에 톡 삼바 동에 숨 삼바 제 숨도 많이 야나기도 와 다디날 동에 제 삼바 제 동에 제 삼바 달라야 제외 동에 달라 제 낭시지 나다부지 봐체 대는데 땅가바디 가도 인사리 다지 대여러다 나서 그래 저와 동네든 때 동네에서 아들 뭐 시에 먹어 가지라 봐 다저와 민두신도 엔티 다티 되면로선 다티 비유 저와 민두신도 대외 춘이 임배 동네 내 있어야 돼 다음부터 차배유는 식지로 와다 대식지 제가 아니 다티 당한도 직접 살아 왔지 살 제세야지 제탄도 왔 심용계제 제타도 희구로 왔다 가리는 희구도 다 민두신도 되고 그래서다 저와 민두신도 대외 NPG 춘이 돼 동에서야 간데 지어라 세비나 아니 다지 장기티 마지 시외 내가 비나 라기 노르롱조 이나엔다 년년다 이나엔다 근데 제 가산에서 간데 지나티 아니 제가 도바르지 경제야데 시야 매빈 버려 다니면 시갈라면데 아니 비게 지금 알아서게 제 민도 힌도 특거라면 시구비다 민도 힌도 마지 시구비 인다 될다 저와 민도 힌도 대베 춘예 인베 동에 제 신자 민도 힌도 되고야지 인버다 놀롱주 변조 포tum석부 제대로 이나야 돼 야진 근데 년에도 코르 포tum석부 간디지 인베 이나야 돼 대주리 맞도 지글라 수질하요 말바트 민도 대한민도 힌도 대주리 예서리
Well, I'm studying for Geshe-la today, so we're in volume number 1, so don't get confused. So we have been discussing different types of suffering of samsara or cyclic existence as described and presented in the Buddhist literatures. And so as we laid out the major outlines in the beginning, that we could talk about what we called general sufferings of samsara or generic sufferings of samsara. And then we can talk about the specific sufferings and problems of samsara. And again, we find many different categories or classifications of suffering in Buddhism, even in terms of presenting general suffering of samsara. For example, there are 8 types of suffering, or there are 6 types of suffering, or there are 3 types of suffering. But at the moment, we are focused on the 8 types of suffering. Okay? And so we have been discussing the suffering of birth. Okay? And this itself is presented under 5 sub-points. And we have already talked about the first 4. And so today we pick up with the 5th sub-point, which reads on page 273, volume number 1, English translation of the Lamrim text, birth is suffering because it is an unwanted separation. Okay? So what this really means is that once we are born, then of course eventually it will end in death. Okay? Nobody who has been born has lived forever and forever. Okay? So birth ends in death, so which is really the separation from all of the things that we cherish very much, if you will. Okay? And so we may be very fortunate in that we have many loving family members and friends who love us to death. Okay? But at the time of the death, there's nothing really they can do with us, and we cannot bring any of them with us into the next journey. So we will be separated from our beloved family members and dear friends. Or we may be very lucky in owning a lot of resources or the wealth. Okay? We are really rich, and so life in terms of material necessities, we have everything. But then at the time of death, again, we have to leave everything behind. We cannot take even little wealth with us. And so as we can see that in death, we are separated from, right, everything that maybe we have accumulated in this life, friends, family members, and the wealth, and all other things. And that is a very painful, thing. So it is important for us, to acknowledge that, because that kind of separation is what we call, involuntary separation. Now, nobody's willing to be separated from them, right? Nobody chooses to die, really, here in this case. It's just that it is a part of life and the nature that we will be separated from all of them, and that is a very unwanted kind of a separation.
어쨌든 민도 신도 가르쳐도 가만도 송. 동행이 있어. 제와 탐제제 타. 시벨레 만데신이 다 제와 탐제게 타만다고 때 시주리 세레. 제대한 감라. 그리먹고 그리서는 타박 구변 죽드니 누주리 마도 나가란도 이제 링딘 담불링사가 세우리 대장을 톱쳐와 떼쳐와 명문에 전에 담불링이야 다 된게 쇼부터 여러 번 톱쳐부터 문에 전에 너희 나이 다그 야구체는 마제 예산을 시주를 안에 야구를 현적이 배게 양적 파도 정체는 시작 여러 번 당하고 근데 제가 아니 제가 제외 담만에 에네 그때 시주를 맞게 대한 민두라 단 만두부터 고슈 살았지 대장 동에 코나 영화치 그래서 대장 아니 비게 동에 코나 영화를 제와고 따뜻 삼고 열동에 삼 맞아 제 마다 맞게 되는 라차고 저기 여러 당하라도 관계를 여러 번 제 세고내미 부심서 봐야 용기 나타세 내가 매든 게 지레디나 딘데 멤버들 단데 동에 송야티 동에디 야야 삼국이요 살아봤다 가능한데 쇼니야다 동에 생긴데고 그래서 그다 레든 여모니기 형어디 줄베니 참 잘베디 사제 여발랭도 풍고들레 신제를 닦고 동에지 맞도 싸워니 민두 다디 제가 인사 아니 비게지 동에디 그렇다 가능한데 쇼니 텔레 타베게니 나라도 도바산제 좀 된다기 마 텔레 탑이 타바스니지 요바지 송바리 뭐 내주리 여들이 텔레야 타르베게 에니피게지 탑기인으로 보지 말람도 남바리 대 여들이 근데 가게 하먹게 다바 유바 담아야 하먹고 텔라 타베게 에니피게 제 람담이 하먹게 기다 미 통주리 돼야 네 다른 나란 소리 할때 하고 돈도 병원에 다니 소라 군이 님고 네티브 람릉을 배 장초 본다 보지인데 다또 가르제네 공부해야 된다 할래비 이게 알아봐 제가 공부하고 해고 송요 단디 공부하고 해고 대제 동료와 코나 애네 제바고 세다 때 타르치와 되게 동에 코나체디 희주리 대디 다 dom비카 도도르 비슈네 다지 야양 삼국요 하래 거가 갑자기 떠머리에서 대화남이 위험한 인생에 송구 알아봐고 대지 다 남바도 생기를 받다 양양 대지 이제 양양 이제 전에 컴퓨터만서 땡겨 알아봐 내 약보래 아니 대 말에 나는 내도 가가라 봐 어떻게 해서 애니 비게지 가능한도 저는 다 양양 대고 송구 알아다 도도 주나.
So Khensur Rinpoche has given his commentary on that fifth subpoint of the suffering of birth, which I read it to you and I'll read it again. Birth is suffering because it is unwanted separation. And so when we look around in our world, that we find these amazing differences among ourselves in terms of wealth, in terms of status, positions, in terms of reputation, and in terms of many other things we can think of. Okay? And there are some people, who are internationally known and famous, right? Like everybody loves them or respects them or whatever. Okay? And or there's some are just multi-billionaires. They can never finish up using their wealth in this lifetime. And all of that race. But regardless of all those differences we have, when our life comes to an end, because birth leads to death, then we will all be equal. We are equalized, and we will be separated from everything: name, fame, status, wealth, family, friends, everything. And so we will all become just the same there. And that kind of separation is really painful, and it's a lot of suffering. And even the rich people, maybe they might, expect that, hey, I'm really rich and I have so many people serving me. And when I die, I'm going to die very happily in my wonderful bed, and everything. Well, maybe it's just wishful thinking. You might as well die in some tragic accident or some kind of tragedy. Nobody can predict that, So all of those uncertainties are there. And so it's very important, really, for us to think over and again this kind of a matter, how birth in samsara, birth due to contaminated karmic actions and delusion afflictions in samsara is always in the form of suffering. Okay? And so our very point of really reflecting on this is because there is a way out of samsara, right? And it's not a fictitious, it's not an imagined and fictitious idea. Shakyamuni Buddha, historical teacher sitting over there, he did it, right, himself. And then he said, hey, if you don't, want to be in samsara, single existence, yes, there's another option called nirvana or enlightenment, and you can achieve that. And not only he said, well, nirvana exists, but, I have shown you the way, right, that leads to nirvana, if you choose to, right? If you don't choose to, that's your, decision, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So as practitioners, I think it's very important for us to, look inwardly, not get too much, externally oriented. We have to be, contemplative and internally oriented, and we have to really, seriously contemplate and meditate on these things, so that we understand, what is wrong being born in samsara, under the influence of contaminated karmic actions and delusions. So long as we have these physical and mental aggregates we call body and mind, and these are the results of afflictive emotions and contaminated karmic actions, we are bound to experience, one or other form of suffering. Okay? There's no, way out of it unless we try, to follow the right path. And maybe at the moment we might think like, when we really don't usually think about, life goes on as it is, everyday life, looks like, okay, maybe right now I'm really, in a good situation, life is good, I don't see any major problems in my life. I have good friends, who love me, and I can hang out with them, and whatever, right? We are not really on a very superficial level. We are not thinking deeply about these things, because these things we cherish, we could lose them at the end of the, that's the storyline, and we have to really take that into account. So Khensur Rinpoche really appreciates, that your familiarity with the Lamrim teaching, that the efforts you are making to contemplate and meditate on those things are very, very important for us to grow spiritually, And as the lineage masters, say that, we really do not find real happiness in samsara, even to the size of the head of the needle, the pin of the needle. So long as we're in the samsara, it's really like sitting on these like pointy things. As everything is really poking, don't make me say that, but poking us, but we don't realize it, sitting on that. And so what we consider as really happiness and really is not genuine, real happiness. There's no real happiness in samsara. But there is the option. We could have it if we are willing to invest our time, time, effort, and practice to do the thing. So Buddha has shown us the way, and so that's the way to think about this.
다디 동절 해비나 동디 해빈 단단도 디어러바다 가담기 랑르 통바생 로정 세제 종견 디어러바다 공 뒤다되니 비지 코에게 비지 동연 톡섬르비 해제 동바배 나를 흘러지만 또 땡기 매위임리 이 매마도 가담기 랑르 통바 만나바 세네 셈베 시야다 그래서 가담기 야삼비임버바 야삼비인디 다티 응나 스티벌 다난도 지 컴동 코에 동일 지 삼비나 에는 안도 동을 지 동가고 좀 시기 제약이 돼 인도게 애송비임버리 어 제단 딘데르부지리 양양 삼나 양 시부지기 비게지 로레야 녀아르지 가로 통인도 다다고 지기 요더라봐 어 딘데지 송로지
And I would like to tell you this short story about one of the great Kadamba Geshes by the name of Geshe Langri Thangpa, who is famously known for his 8 verses mind training, texts, And Geshe Langri Thangpa was a very serious practitioner. He deeply reflected on the suffering nature of samsara and how all the beings are really experiencing that. So he really feels so compassionate and not happy about that, that the beings in samsara are really deeply buried in suffering and problems, And that really affected him so much that he never smiled, it is said. He was always looking serious, And when you look serious, don't smile, then people can label you, right? And then many local people say, oh, that is the Langri Thangpa, the dark-faced, Because he looked kind of aloof and, serious and not happy, And then slowly, of course, the words go around and it came back to him. So Geshe Langri Thangpa heard the nickname people have given him and what they're talking about. He said, if you seriously think about the conditions in samsara, is there really something that we can be happy about and smile and be cheerful? He asked the rhetorical question. There isn't one, So that's what it is, when we deeply, contemplate the suffering nature, then it really affects us emotionally. It's not an intellectual thing in the head or somewhere, It really connects us with the rest of the sentient beings because, we all have the same condition, situation, and it really helps us to feel compassion, but at the same time feel very concerned about everybody else in the samsara.
어제다니 다 야양 삼고기 어려다 야양 맞다 맞지 자지 맞다 맞이 베트는 안도 단지 본지 어려입니다 이 동도와 동남부터 천재버리 때 라마고만 남지 티시라 송들이 때 천재버리 아니 티치 와레스 응악바치 와레스 응악망아 잡던 게 된지 아니 베지 고랑 세고네 메테 푸숨 잡고 보지 유급갑래 아니 베 고랑 기티멘다 보고 수도 라게 알더래 다 저랑도 도야 저랑도 독수마도 나랑도 제 린디 통도 쳐줘 이스 린디 통도 쳐줘 데 린디 세야데 타바 비카사 그래서 그렇다. 이게 대화쟁이라고 다 대화쟁이 대쟁 대화쟁이 돈들이 단나도 여러 번 대화쟁에서 여러분들 라면 되기 때문에 어떤 데를 양도 쳐요. 이따 독주처럼도 독바쟁 나게 가서. 애니면 저거 나버렸어. 난 배제를 10월 토용에서 봤다. 안단이 남았지 그래 때문에다 지부고 부르다 진짜 나장 갔다 독당도 독바다. 나냐라한테 다 주신 진tun도 식초조래. 아 독중도 독성센다. 라버다도 랍게였다. 다 그런 게 세신도 야 될지 그런 디툴은 줘야 매 근데도 된지 말에 다 그런 디툴은 쳐줘야 돼. 그런 독부럽지 된지기라 봐. 먼저 독바 다른 디툴은 그런 디툴이야 폐쳐줘라 봤어요. 다른 대체도 나장게네 다 디체버다. 린디 정도야 돼요 말했다. 아 상날라라와 민두 날라라와 지로 친다. 그냥 뭐지 때나랑 가마도 다디 대교린디 정그 기본적으로 어디 정간을 린디 정긴 줘야 돼. 라시다 가버지 차용기 되고라 린디 줘야 받대리 날라라와 매마도 저런 그냥 뭐 되게 중나 저주랑 가도 전에 송배 루기도 와. 어 제비 인자 대시도 이 가르 땡겨 왔던 때까지 간제적인 지 코에 동에디 지 양양지 some go with the 땡겨 와레스.
Well, let me tell you another story here to illustrate. I think Khensur Rinpoche is in the mode of telling stories today. My first footnote. So as you know, during the time of the teaching Lama like that, lamas usually they tell us a lot of narrative stories, to be able to capture, the lessons that we should learn from other people's life stories and things like that. So one of the stories they often tell is about what we call a lay tantric practitioner, okay? And lay tantric practitioner who is married, who has a wife and who has children, okay? And it seems like at certain stage his life was going just fine, everything. So when the life, kind of it is like a sunny day, so he is in the habit of telling his wife and children, well, you know what, I don't worry about myself because I can see that, I'm really going to go straight to the Pure Land, but I really worry about you guys, Once I'm really gone, I don't know what happens to you and my wife and the children. I just worry for you, I'm just fine. Okay. So they hear this often, kind of reputation of his storyline. Then one day he really got sick, and it became very serious, and he was almost on the verge of death, okay? So the wife and children gathered near him, and they kind of believed him. He said, what, I know, so maybe you are just, ready to go to your Pure Land, but we are really going to be very miserable, as you always tell us, So they kind of, tried to talk to him. And now here, I think reality struck him, and he says, what, well, I don't think there is really possibility for the Pure Land here. If I have any control over my life, I would want to live with you, Just enjoy some more time with you and all of you. But unfortunately, now I realize I don't have control over my life, So this is the situation, As practitioners, when we really don't seriously and deeply contemplate, the things, right? And we leave it at a very superficial level. At times, we look like very good, Life is good. We are doing some kind of practice. All these appearances look beautiful, But when reality strikes us, so it's in the world, and then we might see the true color of ourselves, just like this tantric practitioner. Now he realizes he's nowhere near close to going to the Pure Land, And he really wants to spend more time with his wife and children, And so this could happen,
다 종료하는데 다 마시세라 봐. 단 뒤송도와 개발 대가도 종료할지 요. 다 개발 뒤에 NPV 한 아주 내내 제베 테스다. 말한도 제내 희요 봐. 제내 희난 게 다 그냥 내진라 버지 희야진라 봐. 내내 제베 테 등에 간데 요라다. 내는 마자 사당하다 근데 간데리 대송도가 세부전 송도 개발도 NPV 년에 제비 테스 다지니시 예시야지 동해 전라와지 영화니 다 가대 용그라스 년에 만내어도 벌 동해 때 간데스 용그라스 당하란서 지시 망고 집에 집에 걸로 통만매 버지 거로 인사다 휴지 동에 요아래 내가 또 제들이 망에는 내배 값을 동에 세배 동에 선 휴지 요아래 때때 당간도 단다 텐투교 말아 당고 현전도 텐기라 봐 근데 텐투교 말아 봐 제비 연사 동에 지나와지 요안에 럽딩선이 되네 송샤스도 와 럽딩에 신도 메세 등에 메상제베 가스르다 랍도 토베 모나 테베 모나 테브로 도바이 네네 녀와다 나도 대흉내 다슴제 가리나 네네 제베 심제 대흉내 대흉내 류용 콤라 동에 첨부 막고서 해송받다로 다디 이제셰디 되네 마샴데 마쫑기도가 될 믹세기 셰바시 자고 그러면 샴데 마 세부체는 마 좀마다가 다 도도로 된가도야 녜기 제네 희는데 녜기 때문에 희샤제네 녜를 마 제두발라 녜는 네버 티 동에 간다버지 요아래 다디 송요아래
So we are at the bottom of page 173, and so here we started to talk, more in depth about, the suffering and the problems or the pains associated with, being born from the womb of the mother. Okay, because we already talked about in Buddhist literatures, we talk about there are different ways of taking birth, right? There are 4 types of, being born in samsara, if you will. And here we are focused on being born from the womb of the mothers, which we all have, And so here we have a stanza quote from Chandra Gomin's letter to a student. And I quote, "After you have entered the womb, which is like hell, you are hemmed in by foul-smelling filth and trapped in pitch-dark gloom, your body cramped. You must undergo enormous sufferings," unquote. And so Khensur said, well, that's kind of pretty clear-cut. That's not, need for explanation per se, but of course there is more, things explained later on. So what really need to consider is that, and as we conceive in the womb of the mother, while we have to be in mother's womb for a while, so what kind of conditions are there inside? It is not really beautiful and hunky-dory thing. That's as described here in the womb is not necessarily very pleasant. But unfortunately, and also at the time of the birth, there is so much pain involved in that. But unfortunately, we have done this many times in samsara, but we don't remember. We have been round and round and round in samsara, and being born from the wombs of the mothers, like over and again, and we forgot everything. Whereas if someone has the ability to remember and recollect, as we say, some kind of clairvoyances to be able to remember, then they could describe exactly as it is, the conditions in the womb and at time of the birth.
대성도 하다 희송과 따라 특대하게 동양시다. 예를 뭐지게 공도 장배 특제직도가 뒤통다마 휴긴 있으겨. 단지 휴매와 뒤삼려마 휴그레스네. 그래서 나타 디 야세부터인데 요 사람은 공예 죽은 도스니 여러 왔다. 공예 든죽배다 밤에 예 든죽당도 간디라시네 도적 요 사람 공예 죽은 도통도 도코나란데 제 마선디 땡주 나를 많고 장도가 공예 죽은 도시 내래 장도가 예 든죽발레에서도가 다단지 공도 협에 특제 되게 통다르다. 다마 휴샤나 시대 대바자면 되라. 경예죽 아니 버다 예죽은 돌려 메가와 남바 망고 소소 용소 가게 스무 다 무슨 이유 살아봤다 메상에 다 망가zum 비간 미게 이게 날 대고라 봤대 다들 딱 맞아 시호지 말아봤다 미 간다 제버진 텐데 있나니 디나려야지 담민데 기지 옹그리 취해 텐데 망고 제외 루지요래 다 간사 제 온동안 레더 녀목 년점 자공기기 간사 희야도 제비나 아니 대선도한테 메단 넘버 망고 용서 강외 심부르 동라 망고 다 나랑 류래 심부세야라고 텐데 망고 요스타라봐 내 얘기 자자게 얘기 나래 심부 망고 요스타라봐 동라 망고 내 신도 ting해와 다 디마리 힘부자요 말 닦고 마데란데리 시바 파마싱이 지어라 파도와싱이 되는 마이니를 좀 자, 될 토스래다. 대다 자주 도시 때는 더 오세요. 배제날. 시바 밤마서는 아주 신이 파도치 두고 그러와. 대 많이 년도 년도 자는 될 토루요. 대 토고요 말에. 간디지나 또는 로투고요 아래. 파도하시니. 도시 때는 토고요. 대다 많이 년 토그래다. 다 내가 온게 대 토브 인자 아니 신도 정해வே. 권이 따생부 동라만 보여 봐. 다가나기 신도 정야와. 권이 된다면 나도 아니 가르센도 권이도 부가당 다 부가서야 돼. 부간 난가서 그러 봐. 부간 난가서 지 코동으로 동자 이거 달라 부가서 그러 봐. 말도 난가들 니 샤고 봐. 도마 체지 난가서 부간 난가서 이제 아주 개 나게 동반 나게 동반데 노안에 나게 동자 튼들 부간 난가서 그러. 어디선도 돼. 부가당 공부다. 아니 가서 공부다 두마든 댐바 아니 비게 삽상 여러 봤다. 제 삽상 대가지 삽상 나올 때 그러 봐. 삽상 배 걸리 뒤날 쟁받다 인지 말에 제는부터 따부따부 된다. 유시그리티 얘네 삽상 나올 때 줄이 있어야다. 진단 레바당 진단 레바당 아니 비게 레자당 강바 레자당 강게 초지 장진 류전도 파베 오 쓰르다. 내당들이 아메 코페나레 내당데 애니 피게지 내당들부터나 진단다 레바다 레제당 아니 강배 초진 장진이 오 쓰도 아마티기디 강배 초지 이 인로 장진고 다 포에오 상한돌라 포아 마직세야도 어디 북디 내게 와 임브레 단디 효그라바단디 효그라바디 가도 유바 인자 효그라바 포에오 어디 내게 와 임브레 아메 거기에 포에오 양안도디 둔로다 안도 관계를 롱가싱이죠 롱게 따디 북디 내신 내게 와 임브레 포에오 롱게 따디 아 북디 내송아 대세도가 돼 대세도가 가르센데 동라마 보면서 데 롱게 띵나 우리 포여고 롱게 띵니 아니 가르센데 띵나 칸이 계득을 때라 다디 봐 디시다들이 많이 년 지다들 대상들이다 그러나게 파도아들이 제 판로 제 그런게 다 레사 그러 세바망고 요래 말다 파다 또 관계를 해봐 먹고 열 때 먹어야지. 다디 파도하다 마치 내비 임비 인자 내뒤 발다 제 그런 파도하다 분럽지 제삼부이나 제 말 sak반럽지 땅 팔지 땅왕럽지네. 에네지 얘도만 죽죽이야. 요번에 때 분럽지나 다 카드파 계획을 땐디 알았대. 효예는 카드파 계획을 봤대. 에네비 잡디 투 또할 수 늘수 때네. 내디 알았어요. 다 함직다 도분답지 다 보면서 그러면 다 모두지 제 온도 담비는 아메 아니 비게 롱게 내 땅에 다가래 돼 카드 아니 비게 추된디 알았어요. 칸 듀롤 추지 답디 팁롤 파테네 용우데 데디 알았어요. 대세기도 와대마 대세기도 와 배제나 배제 샤부트는 대세기도 와 대제때디 와다 와 딘데식도라 아니 가르세도 되게 담니 많이 돌았더니 내대시 다디파도 직송나라 발.
So at the bottom of page 273 over to page 274 we have a big quote from a sutra which is translated here as Descent into the Womb Sutra. And I prefer to translate as Entering into the Womb Sutra. Okay, and Khensur Rinpoche said that he himself has not really seen that sutra, the original, but that sutra has been quoted in many other commentaries. So is the case here in the Lamrim. It is quoted. Okay. And that sutra really gives us really a lot of details about the conditions in the womb. And it says it's not really necessarily pleasant and perfume-filled kind of a space here. It is kind of filthy inside. I know it's getting hard, but hey, let's get real. Yeah. Then there's thousands of bacteria in the womb. And also, we are next to maybe the urine bladder, so there's all this foul smelling, the things all around. So also there's a lot of spaces inside. In the Tibetan term we use is namka, which has been translated as space. But then usually we talk about two types of space. One space is what we call permanent unproduced phenomenon. Yeah, but other space is what we call puka namka, which means the space we see in this like gomba here, or the space in our nostrils, the space in our ears, that kind of space. In this different kind of a space. So through all these different spaces and the holes, you started to, smell the oozing things, if you like. Okay. So it is really important for us, to be able to reflect on this kind of conditions, so that the exceptions could be, as Khensur Rinpoche said, many realized and holy beings, they could be born from the womb of the mother, but because of their power and ability, they don't have to, smell and do all these things. They can, do whatever they wanted, really. But like us, rest of us, we have no choice, We can't say, like, oh, it's too smelly and too dark inside here, gloomy, I want to get out. No. Until what the time period, we have to stay. Yeah, no choice. Yeah. So the way we enter the womb of the mother, Khensur Rinpoche says, is once we die, we are in the intermediate parto state, the state between birth and rebirth, right? That's the death. What I'm saying, death and rebirth. And so the parto beings, the beings of the intermediate state, they cannot be obstructed or blocked by anything else except, say the womb of the mother. When the parto enters the womb of the mother, then the parto gets stuck, has no option to get out. Otherwise, the parto beings can really travel through the walls and the mountains, and nothing can obstruct, it from. But in some other texts, it also says the partos can get stuck in Bodh Gaya. Okay, I don't know, so somewhere there. So there are some exceptions. Okay. So anyway, a parto being, by the power of the karmic connection with the future parents, so enter into the womb of the mother, get stuck there. So then there's a fetal development stages, so you go through all of that, right? And as described here, if the child is to be born as a boy, then how it happens is the parto being somehow is more attached to the mom and dislikes the dad. Okay. And through that kind of a process enters the womb of the mother, and that parto being is more likely to be born as a son. Yeah. And it's the other way around for the girl. The parto who's will be born as I think that likes the father and hates the mom kind of thing. And then you enter in the womb and you collapse, and then you are in the womb. Okay. So as is described on page 274, that according to Khensur Rinpoche's explanation, which he's also tried to remember what other texts have said, that if the being inside the womb is a male, then he is facing the vertebrae of the mom, right, and his back is really facing the mom's tummy. Yes, he's facing the vertebrae of the mom, so his back would be right the front. But then with other way around for a female, she would be facing the womb of the mother, and her back will be aligned with the vertebrae of the mom or something. Okay. So anyway, so those are the descriptions Khensur Rinpoche provided. Lawrence.
Oh yeah, that you could. Oh, damn to all the Husarwa.
No.
Dawa relation, that ain't Jack with that, I make it, that is my human to do. Dawa relation, and that ain't Dagwene, that's it. My initiate quant of the card within to do, and our relation puppy, what he killed there. I teach you about the should be what any my be Julam, he was rally you are. My say go say Jordan, Julam, he was rally you are. The condition is the end to descend door. My say in number. Sorting is humor chasing me per migness, Tanga to say Sagarva Mati. 북디 대차 타송아 차비 온듯이 다 막게 세사 소등이 기서 간도 대작서 그러봐 간도 그베길 대작 소등이 기서 너데 아 소등이 지 NPG 다때 10을 봐 10라 땅다도 봐 소이제 믹다 믹으로마 거기에 남아 믹번 믹내 들어봐 원래 가에 많이 팀마다 다 북디기 오기 가 말아서 마고 망고 지어라 그 가에 팀마다 가주 람바 된다 띵네 니레제 빡빡 다든지 주반다고 세 마세 사사는 마제 개날 마제 동배는 주반다고 좀 또 제가 스타트 특별하자 말봐 주변에서 지어라 봐 예상도 세일 차야 돼 히라히라게 지 맵이 버다 어디 땡네 가르쳤다 과알리스다 우리 땡네 레제 빡배 쭉받던 잡이 세지로 칸이 때에 부간에 육반이 깨징 당나서 세 칸 다도 요도 전에 세 칸이 마세 대서 롱가 파티 파 로그레 텐르도 발라 부기텔라치 노타 피부 용기 아이 버다 부기텔 노타 피부 용기 아이 버다 욕징 다티 어디 파티 싫어하나다.
So we're on page 274, right on the top, where there's a discussion about how, once there's a fetal development and the child is growing inside mom's womb, mom has to be very careful with what she eats, and how she behaves, because everything, the way she eats and behave is going to affect very much the child inside. Okay, and so there's a discussion about how, if the mom, choose food, which is interesting. They will literally translated it. It says, let me read it. The bits of the food its mother has eaten are grounded by her 2 rows of teeth. That's a different way of saying you're chewing it, right? You eat the food and you chew it, and then you swallow it. And as the food, goes down to, the mom's system, and the child and the mom are really connected with the umbilical cord, And so it's almost like that what child is getting is almost a leftover of what mom has already eaten, And the description here is, if you bite something and you throw it out, well, the beautiful food looks so ugly, isn't it? Who wants to eat that one? Just spit it out, like, oh my gosh, right? But inside it looks fine, but before we eat, right? So it's almost like that. What child sees is that leftover, spit out thing. Depending upon what mom is eating and how she's eating and how she's biting and everything, that has a lot of effect. Because the child inside is a very delicate being there, So mom has to be very careful with her behavior.
어디게 제단다 디부데 부인아 보면 어디 많이 내도 쇼파 디다야 탈롱도 보지 셴이 미용 그러다. 종아시 사지 된 사인 종아 조빈도 루트 투 칼리 조빈 그러 봐. 아니 네 저기 사 추스야도 네 롱도기야 칼리야 미용도 발다. 토마테 부데야 저기 노르보스기야 다 빼지는 때 송도가 노르보스 다디 지라 비게 겐지보리 제 소위와 말이 때 동네 파시리엔다고 또 쳐줘나 보지 먼저 오메기 단 띵바착 봐 오메카디 착바다 보지 네디 서리 노르보스기야래 근데 뚱라 저야 손주 발라 아니티게 부디 류디 부디 류다다 들어봐 대 오메카디 사대부터 가르쳐 그러잖아 대선도 와도 메르메 본다 보지 송도와대 빼지는 메르메 보 델때 다데 현다 보지 요라에 탁지 간라에 띠마데 탁지 이르지 메르메 보 신세요 근데 야 뚱라 직서디 발에 아니 비게 나르나르 보스 다 소자데 페제르 가로지 아미용 거 하다 뚱라 직선디 근데 에네 거르거르 버시니까 간라 옥모통도 페이지를 돼야 그 사진 없이 땡용 그래. 먼저 돈도 답도 fikdine tangayung dum buri tangpo tongayung kuda wo thi sorda bo jegi tene je garso kora kor go bo je tene kangla sine ta kangla tengur kangba lakba ni ngos ngasi nyel tongayung ge te ti negap tela ni nge ti negap ki ti simje tela ni pige nge simje tela ni pige je 디스기였다. 얘네 가르쳐가 난도 직다 디스기로 반지 이덴티네 친명알람 줄송스 땡아티 안도가 어디 치송스기야래. 이덴티네 친명알람도 줘봐. 텔린데바 뉴뉴뉴 쓰기도 제비 인사 디 가르치기 왔잖아. 노르노보다 메르메보다 나르나보다 고르고보다 강라세 강라 청주 뭐 용서 쪽으로 교류에 교신 스타디 약가로지 섭단도지 가로지 차린 거였다. 다 미차당 해오르봐. 내 송도가 송이다 요거로다. 막 유유한 게 말봐. 제단에 강라 청주로 용서 교류 가르쳐 용서 교류와 교신 달랑에기 내가 맞거든. 딩아부티 명래야 낭베치 슈두는 마시도 내기 내가 나 때베 내가 나 신에 펜바남바니 휴니시 바도체 달라 애니피게 예벨레 망예벨레 니타니 때야요래 세바 파만 동감서 펜바남바니 휴니시네 때야요 다 던뜨 뭐가 되라 봐 제비인자 알리 딩에기 내가 뭔가 되스
So then in that big quote on page 274 on the top, it started to describe the fetal development stages inside the womb. And so in the middle of that quote it says, through the thickening. So this is like a stage, where another fetus, it has, it's just the way we describe it is like, when you boil the milk and then the cream is formed very thin. It's almost like that. It's very delicate. That's why what the mom doesn't eat has to be very careful. It's such a delicate state, Maybe after a week, it becomes a little thicker, and it's we call quivering. Quivering means it's more like a little thickness like a yogurt in a stage. Okay? And then slowly, it solidifies. Because what's happening is, our body is constituted by the elements, right? We call water, fire, what's the space, and earth. How can I forget earth? Earth, water, fire, and wind. And so they kind of become solidified, interacting with each other and solidifying the fetus here. And so now it started to form a shape. So that's why it translated as elongated. It started to get that. Okay. And then maybe slowly, next after a week, it started to have like, almost like the limbs are starting to come out like protrusion. It's just like the description Khensur gave is, if we grow something, before it sprouts out, there's something protrusion, right? Oh, yeah, this is going to come out, right? Like that. So these 5 limbs, we call it, like the 2 arms and the legs and the head, little protrusion started to develop. Okay? And so that's called the globular stages. And then afterwards, we started to form the more of the arms and the legs and things. So that's where now it started to look more like a human being, if that being is to be human. Okay, we just think in terms of human. Okay, and so in other texts, we say there's description about 22 different stages, things like. So we don't have to complicate it and go anywhere else. But so in these fetal development stages, we sometimes call the 5 stages there. If you look at that, I think there should be 5. Thickening, quivering, elongated, globular stage, and then the embryo transforms into fetus with arms and legs. So there should be 5 stages, And so during this time, you're still in the womb, right? You don't have to opt out. There is no option out, right? You're just still inside. So what the mom does, inside conditions, everything affects the child.
Oh, that is it. That is the Lakbata, Gangbata, and Rambani. Say, new tea, Kujosha Jaya, you must teach you imbre. Lakbache, Gangbache, Rambatonzo to sing to your imbre. That is Kujoja Kuyanguche, and the Sita Bebre. That is to don't the culture to many of Hedrita. Compassia, the Tagatek me, Auntie Sungu Marie, Matonzo to me, but to me, you are the Sungu Araba. Oh, Seta Tisungua. Lakbata gave us a Rambanisha new tea. 납치 해도 된 nembe 메세베 못난데 바르니 아니 가서 바니 예멘 주스 어다들 강바다 강바다 개와 락외티 말한서 버버지네 납치 시경 납치 단도와 납치 히라 개알 소미도 카도 그러면 단자 띠시겨래 대야 대 똑바시라 뜨기래 대 납지 되버때 야양 거리 다 휴모 납지 신시 대센도다 납지 신도 정해 봐 대망년 봐 나라도 납지 신이 되게 대 대망년 봐 요아 임바 봐 다들 대나 신이 대망년 봐 대망년 봐 넘버 메세 봐 다들 야제 시락 만내 수야인데 매빈 넘버 메세 봐 뭐나 나궁데 세자트 개요 말아봐 거래 뒤날 나궁 잘링나 대주로 맞 세자트 개요 말아봐 뭐나 등반이 예멘 주 그래서 그게나 얀 등반이 예멘 주다 파마티기 쓰기나 가이나 제다디디 람링 되는 해봐 잡이 주로 되는 개면도가 등반되는데 야 랑바트기라봐 야 랑반이 예멘 주시다 야제 랑 파메 라간더지 시중 되게 되게 아니 비게 제 동에 나도 용거야 사게요레스 직제 다 세지 로카와탄 당아라돌 사이사도 벌 로텔라 가데요레 론 남도 진남시서와 론 넘버 2가 아이므리 어제 두번째 나란쪽에 때 롱주야가 로텔라다 지식 말 롱주야가 로텔라니 통도와 독이 나는 디생도와 되네 세지 로카와탄 줄와탄 쭈바탄 어허 에네 갈자 타와탄 까와 메다 따브루 다기네 렉스다 렉스나 렉자 렉부터 둘 거의 그 률리 렉부터 때네 세 사람 세 타부 동나이 보고 될 동에 다른 나지 당와도 다 로트 뭐 컨디지 롱제비나야 저기 동에 김이게 부텔라 동에 그런 해지마도 이 용기 매비입니다. 도도로 붙이나 세지 로카와다 카와다 주와 타와 렌 타와다 아니 카와다 메타부 아니 다겠네 렉스다 근데 렉스야 될 룰을 자세히 여러분다 리히지를 자타고 있는 타부 정문이 뒤쳐야 될 렉스를 봐. 어딘데 뒤다도 NP게 제 다디 다 동행용으로 해들 다 도도로 붙이 동 어딘데 레이스래. 나오.
So inside the womb, as the child has really very much formed the whole body system, if you will, arms and the legs and all of that. But the space is very cramped space. It's not like you can ask for like a leg room or something. There isn't one. The placenta encloses you, so you're really bound, entangled with that. So you can't really ask for the armrest and the leg room, anything like that. That's inside your womb. And also it's very shrouded in darkness. You can't like, oh, it's just too gloomy and, we just put the light on. No, there is no, light inside the womb of the mother. As we said, whatever mom has to be very careful. If she drinks something too hot, that temperature affects the child. If drinks something too cold, that affects the child, And so mom has to, be very careful with what she eats and behaves. So the description here, as we can see, there's nothing positive we are talking about here, and there is a reason for that. Maybe we had never thought about the condition inside the womb, but to be able to, wake us up, in what kind of condition we were there before, and we're going to be, so that it'll help us to be able to find way out of it. This kind of a way of taking birth. So the description is very foul smell inside, and the example given here is very Tibetan, and Khensur would realize that it doesn't work here, The Tibetans might, some of them, we use some rags to blow their nose, and then, they just reuse, it's just smelly and dirty and yucky, and it's just like you want to vomit and throw up, you don't want to look at that piece of rag. But he said, well, here in America, you use clinics, so you just use it, you throw it, so you never saw what it is, So it is very smelly and foul and dirty like that. Let's call it Tibetan rag, Okay. No. And then, so mom has to be very careful with the taste of the food. Usually when we describe taste of the food in the literature, they describe only 6 types of taste, So those 6 are the bitter, sour, pungent, salty, spicy, and astringent, But for that, the delicate, being inside the womb of the mother, any of these tastes mom loves and whatever eat is too much, for that, child.
어, 들이. 다 지네 마세 렉스라. Sin too much is the Sin too much in Metan, Koen sauce, too much you started that, too much not to Tina, don't do it to check, but it's going to trick it out to cool to think it's your and the tired. What didn't I think any piggy Mizami chili pugati? Mitama in the man, check says some not so say too much. Sadu Saugravata, 7 I say too much in a metallic coe. Most woman usually take out that year, your Martina, Korangi Lake on the Puti, say, Sotic, Saravata, metallic coe, sauce, that is. Bad mix hanging said to chat, the batic long day to Koran, long chair, you Saravata, Putala. Say too much in Metan, Cohen, so Metan and young Maratum Barbe, Metan and young Maratum Barbe, and Tamjin Dantuni, Neso, Tam much Tajil Hustarati, Tamacha Marata, Covenal, Tama theoretical name, raised it, Rabdum Barbin, the daughter, Metan and young Marabdum Barbe, pay, Tamda pay, talk with you, but tempted when Rabdum Neso. So go on one metensity. So go on what temperature, Yaji, taking about today, young Mary, take up, she can't sit on the so, may have so go on one cartendo. Metensity, that temperature, damn it, think that the Cartore Korea temperature would get to marry. So go on one meten. Then, me Luigi Nangi Mani, Kundo Tung. What are the Narato, Joan messing it in Batata? Joan messing it in the Valata? Me, my any. Male Luigi Nangis, many any Kune, Kundu Tung, you also Tung, Koran, new the Chigiota. Joan make any pig, new tape, my Nang, new the Kundu Tung Sin Bag, Ta Takundu Ta, Yonso Tassi at the Tower, the Nangazuka, Rajati, the Rajati on the Sugar Rajayarva. Then Narawa, Ngawa, Tadu. Took some sort of the Grava, Tabutina, Navala took the Grava. But then I think any pigate tower in Naya, Tavoti in the Yateli Tower, Hindu Tower in PH, Tower Telaya, Tartu be Tower, which is Mango or Nava, you can get Yorba. What the time wants to start, second to sick. There's a 6 at the May, sick, but in a pay, Lyons, men are here not to me. Jitena can make Pevana hit that sick to you, Marti Yenayata, Tawa Hibuji or in Barabada. Kundu say, you also say, Kundu say, you also, any car send you. You also said things, to get the Tawa Chamber Chagota, so and Miseba, you don't want, you want Joro, what a theory, to get the Tawa, that daughter of the Tungan on Hittery. Jabby in that, they may today chat and get put the getting to get the Tawa Chagbo. Yes, they remember. Suba, Miseba Yidu may want that Dubata Yomarati, Yoya, Duba Yid, Yoya Marti in a taco, Manon Pagnon, then Yon take your Bati Cogenal. You'd know one Juro, what's it? That great.
So that the child inside, is really crammed inside the womb of the mother, and is very gloomy and dark. And kind of living sort of in, with a field inside. But then, due to karma, karma is interesting that, among all these filthy things, whatever mom's leftover, the child finds some kind of sustenance to be able to survive in the womb, generally speaking, okay? But the life inside is very fragile, it's unstable in the sense that the child does not have the awareness of what's inside completely, It's just kind of like you're in like, what do you call that, twilight state, something, there. And then, as we said, our body is constituted by different types of elements. Mom's, fire element of the body is too much, for the child, the heat that mom's body generates, which is the fire element. We can think of that fire as like outside fire that burns everything, But then there could be degrees of, intensity of that, Maybe it's not too bad. Maybe it's moderately hot, and then it is really super duper hot, and then it is just like killing hot and whatever, So we can go by any degrees of, how hot it is. So that is really affecting the child very much. And so therefore it says here, it's kind of a summarizing statement. It experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony. So as we said, the inside mom's womb is really not a Disneyland, the happiest place on the earth. But he didn't say that. But it is the it is a really gloomy state.
오야 다들 막 휴기다. 희송소写了吧. 다디 이제 대신도 다 단다 동에 공도 해봤다 망고지 휴브리 대신도 아니 마에서 하장 융무수바다 하장 넘바수바 막세 융융마도 마세빈데 야 넘보 초보 당아도 보기는 넘보스기세 융융이면 넘보도 보지 이거 타부 상계지요. 될 넘보 같이 그러다. 넘보다 양 가게 세 또보 가게 장와 가게 차와 가게 애니피게 제 줄와 나와 애니피게 카와다 대 공기에도 하장기 값에 세서바 당 하장기 카르보틴데 기베 세서바 당 노발 줘바 당 양제 부고변 유 힌든도 받아 버텐데 제비나야 디 동해 파마인 버다 동해 파마 누가 줘봤다 하장 족받다 야 마디 부디 거기에는 유 힌도 빼게 죽게한다고 시불래 봐 근데 매비 머리 류지 쫄람디 빼하고 땡고 위해서 봐다 하장 족받다 하장 족받다 다 족보 시부지 종린 족보 시분 로바다 양 처음으로 잡네 처음 잡지 영어로 봤다 지메길 처음에 한다고 그랬지 라미를 처음 따기도 하고 근데 맛있을 거였다 좀 잡아다 아니 비게 깨봐다 아니 깨봐서야 돼 가래 깨 잡아다 실내 깨 잡아다 이제 깨 잡아다 매일 종도 넣어봐다 아 뭐랑 그때다 대양 간장 비제대비 매 타보 디렉지라 아니 비게 넣어봐다 쪽쪽 버는 넣어봐다 야 쪽쪽으로 붙이네 양직 대장지로 디렉지네 붙들라 누구요 아이 버다 쪽쪽 붙이야 누구 매비 버다 다 공지 기분 나시리 다 많이 좀 간삽삽리 제 고기였다. 쪽쪽부른 도바다. 아니 동나야서. 얘는 내발라 너버라 송신. 땅에 건도 휴버 대다 탐제기니 제비나 양에는 내베게 부달라데니 너바체니 송샤스겨. 다 송샤스겨. 건도 탐베 특제지 바티기 통다더부터 마마 데리어 임바래. 어때데리.
And towards the end of towards the end on page 274, trying to summarize here, it says that in one sense that the things described here is kind of like a informational education for the moms. If they are expecting mother how they should behave properly, because the child inside cannot communicate and say, "Oh, mom, it's too hard," or "Don't jump like a crazy," or something. Can't. So mom has to know that. But when mom is very mindless about her, what she is and what she behaves, boy, it's just a terrible insight for the child. That's why we got to talk about this. So if mother eats too much, she doesn't eat enough, maybe she's anorexic, I don't know. Or that affects the child. Or if she loves too greasy food, too spicy food, eat all you can kind of thing, that is hard for the child inside. And then, of course, when child is inside the womb, mom, she just loves to have sex or something, that whole activity is going to be, turbulent for the child, and or that mom, really likes to run and jump, and she's just a jumpy mom kind of thing, that is going to affect the child. Or that, if this much is, squatting in front of the fire is like, traditionally you cook food, right? That's why you squat in front. So that position is also very uncomfortable for the child, inside.
다디네 디도 포아지 단지 공도 휴번 나시리 다마 로향 되게 있었다. 포에 값도 여러봐. 등 포아스인 디고 올 여러봐. 롱갈 때네 징방에 징밤 다마 나도 저 정왕에 마 징네. 정왕에 마 징네 다 부고 봐 징네. 아니 세싱을 쭉 봐신도 내버려 송소. 기부 감보 세싱을 쭉 봐선 지어봐. 민감보 동래야 제숨 잡을래야 동네 제비게 동해 지어봐. 밑에 동해 지어봐. 어땠나 진게 아니 그게 세싱을 쭉 봐. 빠지는 동영아 지부 감고 세신을 쏘고 세신세야지 동경 걸 장이 이제 쏘부다라 세신스기였다. 어제도 지부 감고 세신을 쏘바 현도 송소 어체 알아서 나다가 사주리도와
So, I mean, being inside the womb of the mother, you're crammed from all sides by maybe mom's intestines and the placenta and all of those things. And so the way mom behaves is going to affect the child so much that it says that sometimes it feels like you are like an impaled, on, trident or something. There's a description of, this trident is the three-pointed thing, if it just pokes you and, lifts you up, just imagine, how miserable you're going to be. So the child inside probably feels more like that. Yeah. Actually, I felt so much pain today, even translating this one. No.
다지 다가 샤기 인시한테 봐지 디골 통리트맨 해지란도 봐도 텐도라버리 나라도 돌링라버지 신도연아 이니 야송한 되게 디골 다 어리 다 근데 휴잖아 양거라 독발인데 유시기라 봐. 제비 인도 와라 아니 야 유나 야 세세야 되대 유나 나로지 아니 내 잠게 대양 가라도 파도 나핀도 잡지 않는 되게 아리 내 잠내 되게 아리 아니 지 그렇게는 재미도 가막 주티도 뒤등라니 근데 인스
So Khensur Rinpoche would like to stop there and yield the floor to you, for your questions or observations. Maybe you don't have questions about this, any questions about the Dharma, or maybe you have questions about this. We need to clarify something we don't know. And Khensur says, we can be very kind of a conducive atmosphere that you can ask questions. If I don't have the answers, anybody can volunteer to answer it, So we are just all answering each other's questions, okay? So don't necessarily have to look for answer from me. Me meaning Khensur Rinpoche, not me, the translator. Yeah. Nice.
Excuse me, this is my first time to have question.
Uh-huh.
I have a question for sentient beings. Will it's like when the being enter the mother's womb and the consciousness enter also as well. So we experience all kind of suffering, like you just explained.
Mm-hmm.
But how come, like for people with, the high beings will decide to choose for their own choice to enter the womb? So do they experience the same suffering?
Okay. Yeah, I understood you. Thank you. Moran Tiwa Shue did the walk in Sunumje. That on the Nala, Ninju, dollar Shishan, and Tangianalia, and Karso or Chakanshi or one.
Larry.
That don't stop to what, Magi, but that you did touring in zero to what?
Really.
So the D, but in a Tangazitan, the Kansa Pebble in a Tadi getting zero. That I can't remember this song on Bena, that mixage and carriers and a cute number of the me to pig or what.
Really.
So the concert and didn't net down to Jashi and any Alia pay the economy, Damgache or what.
Really.
Carson paying or less or what. And again, the kissing and a pair in a Tande to get the concert younger young Maresta.
대단히 가지 어디 가지 예마치 휴타리 녀도 족바 숨다데 콜로주다 란종이 레상이 시삼지 다지치나 그런 신세네 야 지북 담아카지 녀지 감 중대생이 된 아란족이 타벌 루베게 땡사 제 체벌 하고 있더기요 녀 주지제 마냐와도 주제리 제도 용겨 말해 야하던도 여기 하도 주제다 되네 레디 대담지 있는 피게 동행기 라신 시리 등자단 잡아두지 동행다 요아리디 동행서부터 요 말해 레디 내지디 많이 좀 가야 주된다부터 내지 감 중대 제도 발라 야지 땡디 담미도 제 들려서요 나च्या와도 가리지는데 잠불링 봐 Rambling Benale, Yaji, Rambling Malachine here, Yaji come from Daji, Jena in it. The children I tainted no what Tomba which is that is in everything Yaji, Chequia Terry. Near the chamber, ready, to me you bet, Chapa, married the cousin Husaiba. College was in the lake, Gawatop Cherry Ongi, young Enaleal, Pediatric. Jokes on somebody to turn to your race. He can get in the mixing Pacha Thomas to me somebody, Pata did you. Ranjung Situala Ranjes and Yena, Yan Jukpa, 다 얘는 내봐야 근데 시송 삼비 근데기 가사 찍여래. 라리 tomba 산지 좀 된데부터 얘는 야레 따쳐봐. 손음 따쳐봐. 이시 따쳐봐. 숨겨 왕기 야 내봐야 시. 말봐 죽봐 야시. 내봐야 시. 마세봐야 시. 용아 시. 어떻게 신데 단디달 근데 송도가 빼제나라. 레섬이 시삼니가 다지처럼 거름 힘도 맞자요. 거름 힘도 맞자요 송래라. 어떻게 요아레스.
그래서 그좀 이제 다시 제대로 갈바는 게 나리야다 내가 부수도 싶으셔 와.
네네네.
그러나서 디디스나 쇼고요나 안에 디 동에디 연결을 용부터 친디고로다. 산지 좀 되듯이 야 주바 친구를 나로 여바 친구를 마페바 친구로 와. 근데 나로 그 사르서는 야기 미고 주비에 가 친디요 와. 디기 동에 연면서.
네네네.
그러나서
네.
동에 연결면서.
동해 요 말이서 거타래 다디 동해 요 말이야. 빠져 가게 날이 얘기 날이네 야 추지 걸 따져 먹고네. 파다 탕발라 더 같은 데니 나도기 가서 당다디 부속 더 힘을 치해서가 근데 멤버야 베베 용이 따져베게 다고 다나르고 제니 베 추지 콜로 거 같은데 숨겨야래. 다른 간도 자고 풍보래라 경험이 긴뒤 처음부터 장죽 선배긴뒤 처음부터 아니 베게 걸 따라 먹고 쓰기야래. 베게 딴 데도 발라 중중쯤부터 민두가 중중내서 따라 먹고 취야 민두데 얘네야 된대기 베게 당나한 거 온게 된대 용투고요 아임바레스.
So to answer your question, Khensur Rinpoche said that what we have today described focus is really, if you will, the dark side of being in the womb of the mother. You know how everything is not really working well. It's filthy, it's smelly, it is gloomy, it is crampy, it is like miserable, all of that. But in the case of those exceptional ones, as we talked about, I think I talked about this some other day. For example, the universal king, Chakravartin Raja, because of their stock of merit, they know that they enter in the womb of the mother, right? They have that consciousness of the remembrance, But while they're in the womb of the mother, they don't suffer like, rest of us, In the case of Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, not only they know they're entering into the womb of the mother, while they're inside the womb of the mother, they have awareness that they're inside, So they control themselves and they don't suffer. In the case of Shakyamuni Buddha, our teacher, then he had the whole awareness of entering in the womb, staying in the womb, getting out of the womb, And so what we focus is just one version, But there are in some other texts that, something like Buddha, even there are cases of, turning the wheel of Dharma in the womb of the mother for sentient beings. Now that's very inconceivable for us, right? We just say it's a crammy like this, like closed, enclosed space, dark, gloomy. So how could you teach, anything like that? So there are a lot of things that kind of become inconceivable. And then the example Khensur Rinpoche has given is, how we know Buddha, taught on the vulture speak, right? Gritkudi. And so Paranjana Paramita, Heart Sutra, and other things. But according to the Buddhist description, there were like hundreds and thousands assembled to receive the teaching. If you go there, well, there is no space for 100,000 to stay. It's just one mount, like the narrow one. So how did that happen, So sometimes, we have to really, take that into account, the inconceivability of things, things like that. So the bottom line is, yes, the realized beings, they choose to enter in the womb of the mother because as best as we described today, according to all different types of birth, being born from the womb of the mother with what we call 6 elemental features is the best kind of life one could have for spiritual development, like Dharma. There is no other option. So they realized that. So the translators, the footnote is the necessary evil to get into the womb of the mother, because that's the best way to, you have to go to the womb of the mother, and then you have those constituent 6, So that's why they also choose sometimes to get into the womb of the mother. Anybody else? Yeah. Please, yeah.
Thank you. So how do we meditate on this specifically, really? Are we to visualize ourselves experiencing, being in the womb and experiencing all the unpleasantness?
Yeah.
And after that, what is the thought that we concentrate? What kind of conclusion do we come? Is it one of these 5 points that we ultimately meditate on?
Okay, wonderful.
All right,
Korangi da di nyamlen chedang wo shige orwa. Khensur Rinpoche di kanang orwa. Dang anzu diga sangma she kwa gyumzen da karis na korwe nyimi shige ore. Ani kaso ko ta le nyomo ki kiena dinde yor slab orwa. So dinde songza da di kom jaba ina orwa. kom jabde kala ya suso ane mai ne kap me gi nge na ya dige de nyong shem ba sam tan kom go ra khande res ro kom jabna che ro ta mai nge al chine dinde du sam so di kom go ra di kom jab gi dubden jung ro ta de ka sa nang lo le ta 참아리 샤다로와 다디 가르라고 다 두든지 고로 타죠 고로 당아서 타줘야 가르쳐 고로서 한 균중도 가져 검고 고로스 때 How long? That's why he's giggling over it. I said, how long?
다디 균중도 가서 그라 람탄티 똑같이 줄게 쳐줘요 말아봐. 배단지 제 예외 동에 해버이나 마이네 기 동에 해버이나 인다 수수 냠슨 나도도 냠슨 영어 다루어 마이네 기 동에 예외 동에 라버도 그렇게 수수 대날 마 깨베 소환 연백이 애니백이 나와는 것도 검고가 아래. 대검나 애니 가르쳐서 디네기 민두비티 답지 촉바티 또 흉체 알레 용거야. 욕 촉처를 처를 나도 마 디날 멤버체 내게 잡대부터 그렇지 간다 현을 반 누구 딘데 제비나 대담지 심구기라 팁투기 매송 거야 배제는 성비라 소소 디날만 냠선요 예 아니 디다 디 토하고 다가르버지 미수바다 텔레 탑이 딱나 똥마마 망고 잡작도 낙주 망고 따네 텔레 탑이 탑지 떼기라 봤다 좀 대인도 대가 나시게 딘데 동에 텔레 탑이 탑지 똥이 내 건지 휴브 나시리 탑지 똥 요아래 타바이 요아래 대셔도 텔 매버디 엔피게 흉적이래 전도연에 다 균이 농답지 가래디 금마금디 강사 수수소솔라디 라레브리 마도 빼제나래야 대가지 검थियो 디네니 디 삼제신 개요 말이 딜로디 용한다부디 소솔 가제 통그도가 아니 잡쟁답지 통람상 되게 욕샤부지 말이 디 용한테야 균투는 로급인데 봐라 다지 검게 꼬달라 가제 검고 요매데 타주 제하자 민도 소소소 가사 소소소 라레브리 다도 동답부디 딘데기 니바 삼니데 퀄리티 니바르지 딸 뚱에 퀄생이 텔 제치젤라 뚱에 라힌지 민도 삼니 딘데기 비게 타제 운디 발라 페제도 동답부디 디강 야고 요아레스
Khensur says, how long, should one meditate on this? Now that depends upon, individuals, there could be tremendous individual variations. And in the Buddhist literatures, there is no specific time factor mentioned, you can, meditate this long. So it's up to the individuals and where you are in the location. But the way you do is just like you said, if we can imagine ourselves in that situation, then it can really affect us emotionally. And that's the way to practice it. If we become more like a curator in a museum, people come and explain, hey, that painting is done by that's somebody alike. So we just always, looking outward and explain it, it won't affect. So we have to feel like, okay, I'm in the womb of the mother, this is going through. And, if I put, unfortunately, as I said, we have been in the womb of the mother, we don't remember. We have been to hell, we don't remember, So we have to put ourselves, situate ourselves in those things as we meditate. And so when we started to do that, it really affects us very emotionally. And whenever we have this stable experiential realization, then that's good. We have to maintain it. We can't just do once and then stop it. We have to maintain the warmth of that practice and experience. So until we get some, really, stable inner experiences, we just keep doing the meditation. And then what is it? Okay, now the decision is that, once we do that, I think what it boils down to is that if we started to develop what we call aversion to misery in samsara, like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, actually I want to choose sincerely this other option, that I can get out of samsara, or then once I'm there, I can choose to if I want to. So I want a choice. I don't want to be bound by this, contaminated karmic action delusions. That decision is important decision, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for your, feedback and active participation. So we will stop there and, okay. So whatever I have shared today, please try to, put some that into reflection and some meditation, your practice. Yes. So we are going to do Manjushri prayer first in Tibetan, and then the quick written prayer for Lada Rinpoche in Tibetan, and then we do the English, and then we do in Vietnamese. Yeah.
罗切，
Lama da gombo je zhen zhang bei yang la
cha
cha
ze
ze
lo gang ge
lo
lo
gang ge lo zhe tim nie jin de
Nian
nian
da
da
nam
nam
da
da
ra
rao
se
se
be,
be
jin
jin
nie
nian
dong
dong
gu,
gu
xi
xi
xin,
xin
si
si
chi,
chi
ni
ni ji tu ga le
Ya
ba
wan de
gang
gang
da
da
si
si
be
be
zhen
to
ra
ma
ma
ri
ri
mo
min
de
dong dong en ji se
lo
lo
zo
zo
gun
gun
la
la
po
po
je
je
ta
ta
zi
ze
yan
yan
la
la
tu
tu
ju
ju yang den song
do
do
da ra
da
che
xie
zho
zhuo
nian
nian
mo
mo
nian
nian
long
long
le
le
jie
jie
cha
cha
zhuo
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 zhe
Ma
ma ri
re
min
mo
se
se
du
du
men
men
yu
yu
gu
gu
qi
qi
nie
nie
chun
chun
ze
ze
ra di nam de
Non
ne
ne
da
da
ji
ji
sa
sa
ju
ju
ta
ta
se
se
yuen
yuen
de
de
lun
lun
zo
zo
jia ze tu
Tu
yu
gu
gu
chu
chu
da
zha
chu
chu
da chu ni jian de Mu sen
Jiang
jiang
bei
be
yang
yang
la
la
de om ara ba za na di di
na
di 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 di
di
di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di di Om Aram Baza Na Di Zhen Den Jue Jie Jian Ra Wei Se Jian Da Lu Tian Mo Min Ba Ra Ka Da Tian Jue Xiong Lu Dao Ba Ye Lo Zhe Ba Na Wang Ze Do Zhou Dian Ba Nian Men Dian Zhou Zhe Zhang Se Lu Zhou Tong Men Ben Zhou Zhu Dian Wang Ga Ra Yao Jie Zong Ga Ba Dian De Ge Lian Zhe Wei Bei Du Chang Zhou Ning Bo Xie Bei Xiong Lang Ze Nam Da Sui Din Song Jie Le Da Nam Dang Shu Jie Yam Do Che Be Be Ban De Lam Me Xia La So Ba Shu Du Che Be Ge Ra Le Dam De Nyam Dang Zhu Gun Zhu Be Sem Jie Jian Sang Wa Rin Nie Nian Zhou La Zhu Lo Sang Yang Den Be 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 Do Zhou Ning Ma Nga Ye Rang Da Xie Yi Gui Mi Shu Dong Wang Di Gong La Ge Den Be Ze Gu Do Xie Be Yang Zhu Song Nang Be Do Nyur Chong Xiu Manjushri prayed in English. Prostration to Guru Protector's sublime Manjushri. He who has the intuitive wisdom that disperses the clouds of true obscuration, like the sun shedding a glorious light that is utterly pure. He who understands all meanings whatsoever of perfect realization, from whose heart emerges the lotus holding the books of the perfection of wisdom. Those who live in samsara are the prisoners of ignorance, afflicted by the darkness of suffering, looking after all the sentient beings with compassion, like a mother looking after an only child. You have a melodious voice of 60 tones. Roaring like a dragon, you wake people from the sleep of conflicting emotions, freeing one from the iron shackles of karma, dispelling the darkness of the ignorance. Thus you wield the sword which cuts down the shoots of suffering. Primordially pure, having reached the 10 Bodhisattva level, the perfect body of higher quality, the foremost son of the Buddhas, adorned with 112 ornaments, major and minor physical perfections of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Please dispel the darkness of my mind. Om Arabhaza Nadi. I beseech you with the loving kindness of your omniscient light rays to completely dispel the dark ignorance of my mind, thus giving me the intellectual courage and intelligence to understand the teachings of the Buddha, the elucidating treatises. O peerless savior and supreme teacher, Shuddhodana's son, all the 17 masters and adepts, Nagarjuna and Asanga and so on, O Dibamkar as well as Sovereign Father Tsongkhapa, gloriously appear here to the auspiciousness. On the great path leading to the heart of enlightenment, you have traversed by means of the perfect threefold discipline and have enhanced ever higher the realizations of the enlightened qualities. O glorious Guru, we offer our supplications at your feet. Pray return gloriously to propagate the teaching of Lobsang by tying well the sash of monastic disciplinary precepts and generating the altruistic intention to free all beings, engaged in the tantric yogas of the two stages. Think of the unbearable pain of the sentient beings who are enveloped in the forces of 5 degenerations, and to open wide the lotus grove of the Buddha's teachings. May your reincarnation appear soon as a source of merit for us. Namo. Namo Dibam Kara Chung Songkha Ba Tong Wung Tu Fu Hong Lam Dong Chung Hin Tu Hen Ten Ban Tui Pu Nui Sen thang da lo tuk ti chen dam kin dam da gai. Ngày đời số vị đố nghiêm thứ cải báo đàn gồ lô. Gồ lại phải khởi báo bồng thứ vị bố thị hiện chứng. Đón số vấn đề lưu dung. Số mong cho lại không gây tuân đề bà bác lô sáng. Bằng sự đá chạy đáy gồ nghiêm mình thiên thủ thư vinh. Rồi lại thố cầm thứ vị đá nguyện đá thời chúng sáng. Xin long thông 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 cô ba cầm ba đồng lưu sáng. Thông bi bố cụ cháu đời có người mong đồ lục ký. Đồ thầy góng mời bán ngày vĩnh sinh gọi lời phật thầy. Cho mong ôi ghê vô địa nhô rồi Khensur Rinpoche ma je pa na je ju je wa nyam ba me ba kon ne kon do be wa jo to ni da wa Rinpoche ma je pa na je ju je wa nyam ba me ba ya kon ne kon do be wa jo sa je pa je ju je me do da
Nhân đề chẳng bàn thế sang chế sinh đồ men đề bố bà. Rô cơ nông đa chẳng là chô bà. Rā rē kō vē jīng āng dē, bēn dāng dē wā mā lē jō vē nē, chē rē sē wāng Tenzin yā zō yē, xā bē sē tē pā tō tēn jō jē, yē dāng gō rō rā nā mā dē lā, nē yā dā yā.